Well, welcome once again to our course on Revelation, and this is session 12, where we will discuss the angel with the little scroll beginning in Revelation chapter 10. This is a little interlude that will interrupt the trumpets, and let's have a look at what it says beginning at 10:1. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. He had a little scroll open in his hand, and he set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land, and called out with a loud voice like a roaring lion. When he called out, 7 thunders sounded. And when the 7 thunders had sounded, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Seal up what the 7 thunders have said, and do not write it down." So John sees a heavenly being descending down from heaven, and it's a very mighty angel. Uh, Lots of the description here is quite amazing. And the angel has a small scroll which is already open. You can see this illustration here, probably from a medieval illustrator, and it's just really hard to figure out how to depict this angel. His legs are like pillars of fire. He has a halo about him. He's mighty. I think it's indicating his 1 foot in land and 1 foot on water, that he's enormous, that he's very large as well, I think is what's being depicted. So the fact that the scroll is open is symbolizing that this is not a new prophecy, but a reminder of a previous plan which is already in effect. We're unfolding something which has already begun. Now, as we think about the very unusual description of this particular angel, this is not how we normally think of angels. I would point out that in the teaching of the church, we believe there is a hierarchy of angels. So there are almost different species of angels, and some of them are very otherworldly and magnificent. This is actually the inside of the dome for the baptistry of San Giovanni in Florence. And as you look up, the different hierarchies of the angels are illustrated around the inside of the dome. And this is a common understanding of the church. So the angel that we're talking about is an extraordinary, unusual angel. He's not ordinary by any means. He appears to be a different class of angels than the strong angels that are described in 5:2 and 18:21. And he's described in a very majestic way, unlike any other angel in the book. The first indication that he's different is that he's clothed with cloud. And elsewhere in the Old Testament, the only person that was clothed in cloud is God himself. However, there's one exception. In Daniel 7:13, the Son of Man comes on the clouds to receive authority from the Ancient of Days. So Jesus is, it's indicated that he is divine by the fact that he is coming on the clouds. So but here we have an angel coming on the clouds, which isn't terribly alarming. It's just I'm pointing out this is a very extraordinary angel. Another indication would be the rainbow on his head, what we have now typically thought of as a halo. And again, in the vision of Ezekiel 1, the glory of the Lord shining about the person is the halo. But we shouldn't get define this too narrowly, that this has to be God, because Moses himself, who clearly is not an angel, his face glowed with the reflected glory of God. So not something that he intrinsically had, but the fact that he had been in the presence of God allowed him to glow as well with God's glory. And so perhaps the fact that this angel glows does not necessarily mean they're divine, but simply that this is a very exalted angel who was able to dwell within the very glory of God. If we were to go back and look at Ezekiel's vision of the throne, he says this: above the dome over their heads there was something like a throne, in appearance like sapphire, and seated above the likeness of a throne was something that seemed like a human form. Upward from what appeared like his loins I saw something like gleaming amber, something that looked like fire enclosed all around, and downward from what looked like his loins I saw something that looked like fire, and there was splendor all around. So clearly Ezekiel is at a loss for words to describe this shining, glowing figure that he sees. In the hierarchy of angels, we often talk about the powers and the virtues as two orders of angels. And from that baptistry, this is a close-up of the ones that are called powers, just someone's understanding of what these angels might have looked like. So we have here a colossal figure bestriding the earth and sea, much more profoundly than that first image I showed you of the medieval understanding. He roars like a lion, and as he does so, there are 7 thunders that speak in response. And in rabbinic literature, often the voice of God was compared to thunder. So God speaks and it sounds like thunder, but inside the thunder is actually words that can be understood. But John is prohibited from writing down what he hears in the thunder. He is again told to be silent and to wait. And this kind of begins the signal of an end of delay for the 7th trumpet, which still occurs half a chapter later. He is told then to take this little scroll and to eat it and swallow it. And this again parallels something that happened to Ezekiel in chapter 2. John is instructed after eating it to prophesy again about many peoples, nations. He is then given the task, which is identical to the task given to Ezekiel, to measure the heavenly temple. So at this point, he can see some kind of heavenly temple, and he's going to measure it. Interestingly, at the end of the book of Revelation, we're told there is no temple in the new heavenly Jerusalem, which descends, because Jesus himself is the temple. So metaphorically, the measuring of the temple here has been compared to measuring the number of people who will eventually be joined to Christ and be part of God's heavenly kingdom. So very similar to Ezekiel, he has a task of measuring, and measuring symbolized preservation from harm, but it's a clear that spiritual harm is in view as we see the many martyrs. The word used in Greek for temple is naos, which normally refers to the inner sanctum of the temple, not the outer courts. So which John is explicitly commanded not to measure. Given the connection to Ezekiel, this seems to refer to the heavenly temple and not the earthly one, yet the text moves on to refer to trampling the holy city for 42 months or 1,206 days. The temple is symbolic of God's people bearing witness and undergoing a time of tribulation. There was special mention in Daniel 7:25 of an interval of persecution that the people would endure. The time interval is 42 months, taken from Daniel 7:25, and it represents 3.5 years, which is half of 7. So it is an imperfect time, an incomplete time, and very symbolic in terms of its number. So we will leave this here, and we will pick up again uh, following this with the two witnesses.